trapped inside a skeleton that never stops growing.
I can open my mouth about this much.
When muscles turn to bone.
It is nightmarish. There's no other way to describe it.
And limbs like lobster claws.
It affects my hands, which causes me 2 fingers on each hand.
Who will be the next victim of this genetic time bomb? The tale of 2 teens with the opposite problem. For one, it's a daily anguish. For the other, this bizarre condition could easily take her life.
By 106, if that's maintained for any length of time, you have actually permanent brain damage with that kind of temperature.
Australia's out-of-control baby.
You've got a child that doesn't eat much but is putting on so much weight.
The mystery illness that is threatening the baby that won't stop growing. The most incredible species on the planet is human. This baby boy is the size of a small adult.
His weight just went up and up and up.
And it's all caused by the mutation of a single gene.
Doctors haven't seen anything like it before.
He's really got the weight of about a 6 to 7 year old at age 2, so he's extreme.
1, 2, 3, yay!
Aaron Barnes may well be Australia's biggest baby. At 12 months, he was the size of a 4-year-old. Now 16 months old, Aaron should weigh 22 pounds, but he's 4 times that big. Born a normal, healthy 7-pound, 8.5-ounce baby, Aaron gained alarming amounts of weight even while his mother Leanne was nursing him.
His feeds were quite long, and just gradually as he got older, the feeds, he just seemed to want more than just a normal feed, and I just started noticing his weight was jumping up quite quick.
Aaron's extraordinary appetite mystified Leanne. Her 3 older boys ate normally, but Aaron craved food, and his body wasn't burning off the calories. By now, Aaron should be walking, but he can't. He's just too heavy to pull himself up. More disturbing still, Aaron began to experience breathing difficulties. A worried Leanne eventually took Aaron to her doctor. The results were alarming. Aaron's blood oxygen levels were far too low. What the doctor told Leanne shocked her.
Sent him straight to hospital. His oxygen levels were quite low.
At the Children's Hospital at Westmead in Sydney, Australia, Leanne was in for a bigger surprise. Doctors diagnosed Aaron with an extremely unusual genetic condition, Pseudo Hypoparathyroidism.
It's very rare, and in fact, it's hard to find an incidence frequency in various countries around the world, but it's probably around about 1 in 50,000 live births.
Aaron's condition was not only rare, his case was the worst doctors had seen.
Because his degree of obesity and appetite is extreme, even amongst the children with this disorder.
Pseudo-hypoparathyroidism is caused by a mutation in just one gene. That defect causes the body to resist the action of hormones it produces. In infants, hormone-producing glands are incredibly important in controlling the body's development. Hormone-creating centers, like the parathyroid glands, release complex chemicals that regulate how babies grow. But if the body won't respond to the hormone's instructions, development goes haywire. In Aaron's case, it's his ravenous appetite.
He obese because he eats a lot, because he has a very strong appetite, which makes it very hard for him to resist anything, and he presumably will go after food as much as possible.
Oh, God, he's heavy.
Aaron is now morbidly obese. His breathing difficulties are worsening. Each night, Aaron is put to bed with a mask that puffs air into his lungs 16 times every minute. If Aaron stops breathing while he sleeps, an alarm sounds.
I'm always scared one day, you know, he might just slip into a sleep and he might not wake up. It really worries me that I'm not going to be hearing him through the night.
Sadly, there is no known treatment for pseudo-hypoparathyroidism. Aaron faces a host of possible hormone-related growth problems. He may be short. His skeleton may not develop completely. He may have diabetes or sexual development problems. And he will always remain on a diet.
But his weight will remain, I think, an overwhelming issue for Aaron and his family during the next 10 years, and hopefully there may be better ways to sort of manage his weight other than, in a sense, the rather crude ways of trying to restrict his intake.
But for now, although it takes an Herculean 24-hour-a-day effort to care for Aaron, he's the favorite littlest brother. 2 months after this filming, Leanne injured her back carrying Aaron. She can now no longer lift him up. Now his older brothers do the heavy work. But there's no mistaking, Aaron's a big, big bundle of joy.
He's usually always happy for the size of him. I know he's beautiful and he's mine, and that's all that matters. And I know what's wrong with him. People may just judge him by looking at him, but he's my baby.
It's a genetic mystery.
I have no idea why, what it's called, or what causes it.
That's passed from one relative to another.
Conditions run in a family for approximately 155 years.
And the most famous family member was known as the lobster boy.
In the most severe manifestation, it's also known as a lobster claw deformity.
And families never know who will be next to inherit the deformity.
There's no way of telling if the condition is going to pop up or not. You know, there's just no way of telling.
Gibsonton, Florida, the traditional winter home base to circus performers and all manner of sideshow acts, including a past favorite, the famous Grady Stiles Jr., better known as Lobster Boy. Grady's claim to fame was a medical condition called ectrodactyly.
It's an abnormality of the formation of the hands and the feet. In the most severe manifestation, it's also known as a lobster claw deformity, so that instead of having 5 digits on your hand, you would have 2 that are divided in this way.
Ectrodactyly is a genetic condition. Why it first appears in a family, no one really knows.
Well, it started back with the great-grandfather. I don't know the year. And then he had one daughter that was born with that condition. And then my husband's father, he had one daughter that had one hand and one foot like his. And then my husband.
Teresa's husband, Grady, worked in the family sideshow business, the Lobster Family.
He was a good husband, a good father, a good provider, kind.
But would Teresa's children inherit Grady's deformity? Ectrodactyly is a genetic mutation with a 50-50 chance of passing on to the next generation.
Once a person has it, they're at a 50% risk of passing it on to their children. So it's the kind of thing that you'll see in multiple generations of a family, with not everyone being affected.
One of Teresa's first 2 children had ectrodactyly. Both died young. Then she became pregnant a 3rd time.
When I was carrying Kathy, I kind of felt like the pregnancy was different. They said she was going to be a little boy, she was going to be normal. She was a little girl, she wasn't normal.
Kathy was born not only with lobster hands, her legs were short and her feet were split. Far from being appalled, Grady Stiles was delighted that his daughter shared the family trademark.
Oh, I think he was very happy about it because I was born almost identical to him. It affects my hands, which causes me 2 fingers on each hand. And it caused my legs to kind of have 1 knee and 1 toe on each leg.
It was inevitable that Kathy would join her father in the family business.
I must have been 5, about 5 years old. He had a banner made up of father and daughter. Mainly would be my father and I sitting on the platform. He would give the spill of how many generations it was, what it affected. He used to sell little postcards of him and I. They asked questions if they wanted to, and then we answered them, and then they left, and then more people came in.
Genetic deformities like the Stiles family lobster claw condition often guaranteed a lucrative living for the sideshow performers of yesteryear.
When I was younger, there was quite a few performers. There was what they called the monkey girl. She had hair all over her. Then there was an alligator man, which had to have water on him at all times. And there was a little woman, which had a bone deformity. A fat man, which that pretty well explains itself.
Kathy continued to work alongside her father until she became pregnant in 1990. But with her sideshow work about to fold, how would she make a living with her unusual condition? And more important still, would the daughter Kathy was carrying be the next victim of ectrodactyly, or would she escape the family fate? Kathy Berry has lobster claw deformity. It's the product of a rare genetic condition called ectrodactyly. No one knows why the deformity strikes some families and not others. But once it's in the gene pool, there's a 50% chance a new family member could be next to inherit lobster claw deformity. Kathy spent most of her life in sideshows working the father and daughter team, the Lobster Family. But when she became pregnant in 1990, she hoped the child she was carrying would be spared the condition. It wasn't to be. Misty was born with malformed fingers and toes.
When she was born that way, I really didn't think one way or the other. I was just glad that she was healthy and alive. Because I knew with me having the same condition or similar to hers, she'd still be able to learn of what she can do.
Kathy raised Misty with the help of her mother and her husband, Misty's father, Tyrrell. Misty is homeschooled by her grandmother, Teresa. But she still has to cope with people's reactions to her deformity.
I don't mind people. I don't pay attention to people when they look at stuff.
She won't stand up and say, okay, what do you need to look at? Missy's like, okay, why are they looking at me?
I'm just too short for almost anything, so. But other than that, I can't do my hair. That's the only thing, and I can't do anything else, though.
The days of the sideshow have long passed, but in spite of her disability, Misty has designs on another career.
I want to be a paleontologist when I get done. I just love dinosaurs and just been very interested in them.
I'm gonna have a hard time with these, because
Kathy now works in a pet store. Her 2-fingered hands can do enough to keep the business going. And it means an income after she pulled out of the family's sideshow business.
I was a stay-at-home mom for a while. And recently, for the last 3 years, is when I worked at the store.
Oh, he's not gonna eat.
It's a regular 8-hour shift, 5 days a week. A lot of maintenance involved, a lot of handling the pets. This doesn't prevent me to doing anything. I do whatever I feel like doing, when I feel like doing it. I can style my hair, I can do needle pointing, I can paint, I can vacuum the floors, I can cook. I mean, everything that anybody else can do with their hands, I can do with mine.
I try to make Kathy self-sufficient. I didn't want people doing things for Kathy because I didn't want her to be dependent on other people. I wanted her to be just like anyone else.
It's actually amazing how useful that hand is, and if you're born with those malformations, people actually overcome them and lead perfectly productive lives.
So, is the condition likely to continue through future generations of the Stiles family? Teresa hopes not.
And there's no way of telling if the condition is going to pop up or not. You know, there's just no way of telling. My sister-in-law in Pennsylvania has children. Every one of her children are normal, and their children are normal, so I think it has just about run its course.
But until medical science knows precisely what genes cause the condition, ectrodactyly will remain an enigma. To this day, no one really knows which family and its future generations might be next on the crippling condition's genetic hit list.
We don't know what the genes are yet, and they're small families and very rare conditions, so it'll take us some time to find them out, but we will.
Pushing the limits of medicine as we know it. New technology that's turning the once incurable into the simply incredible. The 21st century has already witnessed some amazing new innovations. It starts with the latest pill to pop. This is not just any pill. It's a camera that takes 50,000 snapshots of your insides on a journey into the depths of your gut. It's already used to diagnose small intestine problems, and the next breakthrough will see this little capsule perform surgery by remote control.
You'd look at the microscopic appearance, you'd say, that's a precancerous thing. I'm going to destroy that sucker right now. You'd drop the thing down and you'd have a laser beam go out and shoot it and be gone.
Bionics has come a long way since the TV fiction of the $6 Million Man.
With the bionic glove, you don't have to ask for help. You can do it yourself. So, to be honest, that means a lot to me, especially.
From Down Under, an invention that will help quadriplegics regain the use of their hands.
We've got 15 joints in the hand, and there's no other part of the body that has that many joints.
Mick was left paralyzed in a car wreck. He has limited movement in his arm, but his hands and fingers are almost useless.
Really basic things like make yourself a cup of coffee, if you know what I mean. Like, they're some of the hardest things to do.
This will go over your arm to house the motors. And then
the bionic gloves work on tiny motors that reel in the polymer threads controlling his fingers. This is the first time Mick has had use of his hands since the accident. The possibilities are far-reaching.
And we're going to see better devices working better over different parts of the body.
The next model of the bionic glove will operate by voice command. Science fiction becoming science fact. Imagine having an operation where the surgeon does not need a scalpel. This is the latest experiment in no-incision surgery. A sleeping pig is the guinea pig in a revolutionary technique where the surgeon operates from the inside of the patient. No scars, no deep cutting of muscle and tissue. Using telescope-like endoscopes that snake their way down the throat, high-tech probes allow surgeons to do abdominal surgery through the stomach.
Well, we believe that this is a less invasive way of entering the peritoneal cavity, that patients will have less pain and recover even faster.
No incision surgery will be used to tie fallopian tubes or to take a biopsy from organs like the liver. Surgeons can even stitch the wound from the inside.
Do I think that this is the future? Well, I'm biased, I certainly do. It's all in the interest of better patient care, and I think this is where this will lead us.
From an operation with no cutting to surgery where the patient is wide awake.
All right, we're just applying the stereotactic head ring here.
Neurosurgeons can now delve deep into the brain to switch off the parts that don't work.
Tightening these so the frame doesn't move. Our accuracy is dependent on this frame.
A deep brain stimulator is about to literally switch off patient Arnold Nash's uncontrollable Parkinson's tremors.
Arnold, are you awake? I'm going to give you a little discomfort now. I'm going to give you a little local anesthetic here, all right?
Anesthetized but fully awake, Arnold feels no pain as a probe locates the faulty part of his brain.
In a normal brain, you would not hear that sound. You wouldn't see this hyperactive firing. So what you're hearing is the sound of Parkinson's disease.
Once found, An electronic stimulator is inserted into the diseased area. It will jam the signals that cause the unstoppable shakes.
All right, here we go.
All it takes is the flick of a switch.
You notice your tremor stopped?
Parkinson's patient Sam Cady has already had the deep brain stimulator inserted.
We can turn it on with this little device here. Sam, why don't you just go up and take a drink and we'll turn this on.
Incredibly, Sam's tremors disappear with the press of a button.
Try it again. Now we'll turn it off. Pretty amazing.
Amazing new technology that's making today's medicine incredible. The human body is a paradox, remarkably fragile, yet incredibly resilient. Every day, miracles happen in the OR. Cases where the patient should have died, but somehow survived. Here are 3 stories you won't believe until you see the survivors with your own eyes. 29-year-old Sarah Yeargain was skinned alive. It happened after she took a simple antibiotic for a sinus infection, then had a massive allergic reaction.
When I reached down to pick her up, I could feel blisters start to pop and gush all over. It caused her a lot of pain.
It caused her to lose 100% of the skin in her body. It actually causes sloughing of all the mucosal layers.
Within hours, all of her skin was gone. Worse, the lining between her internal organs was also shedding.
Her face had peeled. She was just bloody and oozy everywhere, like an open sore. Her entire body was.
The University of California San Diego Burns Unit had little to work with. Sarah was dying.
You know, I told her family that she had maybe a 10% chance of surviving, and that was being optimistic.
He said, just, you know, stick with her, but don't be shocked when she dies, because that's most likely what will happen.
Doctors put plastic caps over Sarah's eyes to protect her corneas, while they desperately tried to figure out a way to save her life. The solution came from a treatment used for severe burns victims. They stapled artificial skin to Sarah's body to keep her body fluids in and infection out. All they could do was wait.
Christmas Day came and went, and it was just another day waiting to get closer to the hopes that she would survive.
Sarah had been rushed to hospital in November. Her life had been in the balance the entire time. But on New Year's Day, her skin began to recolonize her body. Sarah was going to pull through. Within weeks, it all grew back, flawlessly, like a baby's.
I mean, it's basically like a baby's skin, where it's just very sensitive and delicate.
From this to this.
My dermatologist said it would be great because, you know, in 10 years' time, I would be, you know, I wouldn't be suffering from all the wrinkles that most people when they're 40 do. So that's one good thing.
Sarah went from being the unluckiest to the luckiest person alive.
The fact that she survived to me is a complete miracle.
14-year-old Ricky Barker also had an incredible brush with death. In the space of a moment, Ricky's life was destroyed. A head-on with a car left Ricky with an internal decapitation.
His head could easily be lifted right up off, or forward or back.
Ricky's head was held on by a thin layer of skin and a badly damaged spinal cord. Paramedics from the Phoenix Fire Department got to the scene in 2 minutes.
We knew we were dealing with a very critical, or what we call immediate patient, that was going to be transported to a level 1 trauma facility.
Ricky's mother heard the bad news by phone.
When you first hear hit by a car, you don't immediately think that he got killed. But as soon as she started to say, "I'm so sorry," You know, I immediately, that's when I started to think that this was really bad. At that point, I totally lost it. I lost it. I knew at that moment that my son had died.
We got a trauma patient. We need to get through to the ICU. Head trauma, right?
Against expectation, paramedics managed to get Ricky to the hospital alive.
It's very unusual, almost unprecedented in my experience, for somebody to survive an injury of that severity.
Well, this is a tough problem.
Now neurosurgeons faced a critical decision. Operate too soon, and Ricky might die in the OR. But if they waited for his injury to stabilize, the swelling might crush his spinal cord beyond repair. Dr. Manwaring decided to go in as soon as he could.
Going to surgery at 12 hours was taking a bet.
During a 13-hour operation, Ricky's detached skull was aligned with his spine. His head was pulled down onto the spine and fixed in place with titanium plates and rods. Then, the waiting game. Ricky was alive, but paralyzed. No one thought he'd regain any movement from the neck down. But on the third day, a miracle.
Now, I thought I was seeing things, so I called the nurse in and sort of yelled into Ricky's ear, you know, "Move your leg, Ricky," and he did.
All right, I need a volunteer. All right, Richard, come on up.
And this is Ricky today, walking, talking, and attending school.
The happiness that I was alive drove me to rehabilitate.
The amazing story of a boy who was internally decapitated and lived.
Ricky was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but everybody else in our system was in the right place at the right time.
I have a 15-pound baby.
It's a world record.
At the time this home video was taken, 32-year-old Paula Maestas had no idea that she was minutes away from a near-death experience. Paula was in hospital for the birth of her second child. As the birth was induced, Paula suddenly couldn't breathe. She lapsed into a coma and was slipping away fast. Hospital staff converged on the room.
It was a madhouse. They're pumping on the mom's chest. They're shocking her.
Paula was suffering an amniotic fluid embolism. This incredibly rare chain reaction happens when amniotic fluid seeps through a rupture in the amniotic sac and enters the bloodstream. Paula then had a massive allergic reaction to her own amniotic fluid. Her body went into anaphylactic shock.
I mean, she's dying right in front of us.
Paula's blood began clotting wildly. It was turning to jello. Her heart could no longer pump the thickening blood, and her life began slipping away. Doctors acted quickly to save the unborn baby. They performed an emergency cesarean section in under 6 minutes.
About that time, Paula went into a cardiac arrest, and the C-section incision wasn't bleeding, and she actually had her heart stopped.
Then, from cardiac arrest, a second catastrophe. Paula began to hemorrhage everywhere.
They bleed from all orifices, eyes, ears, nose. There's blood everywhere.
Just then, doctors noticed a strange swelling in Paula's abdomen. They reopened the cesarean section, and to their amazement, there was a gallon of clotted blood filling the body cavity.
We noticed that there was blood in the upper abdomen. We don't normally see that. I've never seen it before.
They drained it. Just as suddenly as it had begun, the emergency was now over. This is Paula early the next morning, holding her baby boy for the first time. Back from the brink of death, Paula Maestas is a living miracle.
It almost defies your imagination. It's just beyond your expectations.
I'm so grateful. I'm very grateful. How do you think someone who saved your life, how do you think so many doctors that stayed by your bedside all night long, keeping you stable and keeping you alive. Just thank you just isn't enough.
For all the advances in modern medicine, when cases like these come along, the difference between life and death is something beyond explanation. The human body runs on a finely tuned engine. If it overheats, the engine dies. And that's why we sweat. Teenagers Jessica Spencer and Maddie Smith have a problem with sweating. Jessica can't sweat.
I realized that I wasn't sweating on my face or on my head, and after the same amount of time, other people would be.
Maddie can't stop sweating.
The more nervous she gets, the worse it gets. As she gets older, she's 15 now, it has become more socially unacceptable to her.
While having overactive sweat glands can be an embarrassing nuisance, Jessica's problem is a potential killer.
The trouble is in the absence of sweat glands. So if you don't have sweat glands, you can't make sweat. If you can't make sweat, you can't cool yourself off.
The human body only has to raise its core temperature by 5 or 6 degrees to risk a total meltdown.
You will initially feel lightheaded. You will feel nauseous. You will feel wobbly. Eventually, you will pass out if you get overheated and can't cool yourself off. Between 104 and 106, you really start to do some damage. And by 106, if that's maintained for any length of time, you have actually permanent brain damage with that kind of temperature.
There are more than 400 heat-related deaths in America every year. And right now, no one is at greater risk than Jessica. In a healthy body, the cooling system is made up of an astonishing 2.5 million sweat glands. Beneath the skin, the coiled glands produce a mixture of water and body salts. Moisture travels through tiny ducts to the skin's surface. As water droplets reach the skin, they evaporate, cooling the body. The sweat response is triggered by the body's own thermostat. Unfortunately for Maddie, her sweat glands don't seem to have an off switch.
There would be times when I would look at her hands and it would be just like she had put them under the faucet and not dried them off. It would be to the dripping point.
Maddie suffers from hyperhidrosis. It's a genetic condition affecting just 1% of the population. Maddie's palms sweat so much, a simple task like writing leaves her hands dripping with moisture. Above all else, it's affected Maddie's self-confidence.
You know, wanting to hold hands even with her mom and dad, you know, feeling that, you know, that we wouldn't want to due to the fact that her hands were wet.
With Maddie now reluctant even to go out socially, the family has decided upon a remarkable surgical procedure to put a stop to the sweats.
I think it will help her self-esteem a lot. I really do.
Jessica's inability to sweat comes from a rare hereditary condition called ectodermal dysplasia. It's caused by a multiple gene defect, which means it affects more than just the ability to sweat.
And the ectoderm is the outer layer of the embryo, and it goes to making the skin, the hair, the nails, and the teeth. And so all of those parts are abnormal, but the single most important clinical part is that people don't have sweat glands and can't make sweat.
Until her teens, Jessica had the problem in check. Now, an aspiring Olympic fencer, her inability to sweat could kill her.
My skin first gets red. Like I just turn really red in my skin, start getting a headache, could even start turning nauseous, not feeling well, like I need to sit down and take it easy.
If Jessica's body overheats, her body proteins could literally cook, just like frying an egg.
Their temperature will rise to the point where the proteins in the body denature the same way as when you cook an egg and it fries. At the Center for Hyperhidrosis in LA,
Dr. Raphael Reisfeld is about to clamp the nerves that control overactive sweat glands in Maddie's palms. The nerves are located on either side of her chest.
So I'm now in the right chest cavity. I'm counting the ribs, trying to find out the location where I want to put my clips around.
It's all done with an endoscope through a small hole in the side of the chest,
which makes the operation much simpler, less invasive, and enables the patients to go home right after the operation.
The amount of sweat we make is controlled by a system of nerves that runs through our bodies.
By destroying the nerve or by clamping it, you stop certain nerve impulses of going whatever way they go in order to get to the sweat glands and produce a sweat.
Having found the nerve, Dr. Reisfeld clamps it with titanium clips. The nerve can no longer tell Maddie's glands to make sweat. And clamping the nerves has one big advantage over cutting them.
Doing with the clamping method offers theoretical as well as a practical possibility to reverse the procedure.
It's all over in an hour. The first sign that the operation was a success. Maddie's palms are already drier than before.
The nurse said that Maddie had touched her hand, and even though she's groggy and kind of out of it, she was happy to feel that they were warm and dry, and the immediate results is that it's helped. So socially, all around, she'll really bloom.
Sadly for Jessica, there is no cure for ectodermal dysplasia.
I realized that having it, I can never really push myself my hardest, and I can't really do my full potential because I'll always have it holding me back.
All she can do is try to keep her body temperature down with water and a personal fan. For a competitive teen, it's a bitter pill to swallow.
Had to make accommodations for it, but I try not to let it get in my way.
It worries me now. I'm concerned about her overheating.
I'm willing to push myself pretty far, probably as far as I need to go to be the best.
Maybe this has made her stronger and more determined.
Imagine if you were a prisoner of your own body. There's no escape as your muscles slowly turn to bone, where your skeleton slowly becomes your cocoon.
It is a medical catastrophe by any standards of the imagination.
19-year-old Sarah Steele suffers from Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva, FOP. FOP is an incredibly rare genetic mutation. Whenever muscle is injured, a genetic defect in FOP sufferers causes their immune systems to attack the muscle tissue instead of repairing it. A very powerful bone-forming hormone is carried to the affected area. Under its assault, muscles begin to calcify.
It's as if the muscles and the soft tissues of our body think they're bones, and when they're injured, they make a new bone.
When Sarah was born, she seemed perfect. The first sign of a problem was nothing more than a stiff neck.
She couldn't extend her neck, she couldn't turn it much, and within a couple weeks of her life, she got little bumps on her spine.
She had a spur of bone that grew off of one of her ribs, straight through the skin in her back.
It was a sign that Sarah's muscles and ligaments were already turning to bone. By age 2, Sarah's arms were locked at 90 degrees in front of her. Sarah was growing another skeleton, and it was taking over her body.
She wants to touch the ears on this goat, but she can't bend herself forward or kneel down, and so she uses her knees to get down into that position and get her hands down since she can't extend her arms.
Sarah has one of the most severe forms of FOP that I have seen in any of the children. And so she seemed to go through the stages of transformation of muscle to bone at a much more rapid rate than many other children in the world.
Sarah has watched helplessly as one by one her muscles have turned to bone.
My arms locked when I was like a year old. I think I was about 5 when my jaw locked. So I got my first manual wheelchair in 1st grade. My left wrist locked in 4th grade. Well, I've lost pretty much all of my major joints, and I might have lost some movement recently in my ankles.
There's certainly nothing wrong with Sarah's mind. She participates in college life, even though her skeleton is already like a living straitjacket.
Basically, the difference here is phonetics will be observing.
I have a little bit of movement in my arms, like I'm able to move my hand to reach my tray and to feed myself. But I can't brush my hair, and I need help putting in my hearing aids, and I often need help with my glasses because I can't quite reach to get them.
Harry Eastlack, born in 1930, is the best-known victim of Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva. His bizarre skeleton, housed in Philadelphia's Mutter Museum, shows sheets of bone encircling his entire body. Before he died in his late 30s, ribbons of bone had locked Harry's skull to his spine. His shoulder and hip joints had fused solid.
Harry donated his body to medicine, and his sister told me some years later that she was there when he wrote his will, and he said to her that he wanted his body to go to medicine, to be preserved, and to be available for doctors to study in generations to come, and perhaps they could learn something about this condition that would help them help others.
Sarah is one of only 500 known FOP cases in the world. She has the most aggressive form of the condition. Eventually, she'll be unable to move. But on the other side of the world, another FOP sufferer shows how amazing ingenuity can overcome some of the nightmare symptoms of this terrible disease. 19-year-old Sarah Steele is the victim of a medical catastrophe. She has Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva, FOP, a disease that's relentlessly turning her muscles to bone.
FOP is a catastrophic sabotage of the body's skeletal system. Painful swellings that look like tumors seize the body's skeletal muscles and transform them into bone. And eventually, ribbons and sheets and plates of bone replace the body's skeletal muscles, cross the joints, lock them in place, and render movement completely impossible. It is a medical catastrophe by any standards of the imagination.
FOP is a genetic condition. Fortunately, Sarah's brother and younger sister have escaped its ravages. That's because FOP is caused by a chance genetic mutation. It happens unpredictably and very rarely.
FOP is one of the rarest conditions in the world. It affects approximately 1 in 2 million individuals. The condition arises as a result of a spontaneous new mutation in an as yet undiscovered gene.
Sadly for Sarah and her family, because so little is known about the cause of FOP, there is no cure in sight.
The story that I think about is where a sculptor creates a statue of a beautiful girl, and then later the girl is transformed by the goddess of love into a real girl. In FOP, it's the other way around. You have a beautiful girl who is being changed over a lifetime into a statue. It is nightmarish. There's no other way to describe it, though you learn to live in and with the nightmare.
It's been very aggressive. It's been just extremely aggressive. Some people will have periods of quiet where there's no disease progression for 3 or 4 years, and she's never had that. It's been pretty relentless.
8,000 miles away, On the other side of the world, there's a happier FOP story. 30-year-old Damien Jones lives on Phillip Island, near Melbourne, Australia. Damien was diagnosed with FOP when he was 11 years old. The rare genetic defect makes the body attack itself. Instead of repairing damaged muscle tissue, the immune system attacks it and turns it to bone.
Over the period of time, I lost my left-hand side, then my right, then my jaw. My spine's always been a bit crooked. My left ankle, my right leg, and now my left arm. I've lost the movement of the elbow and the shoulders aren't all that good.
For FOP patients, the prognosis isn't good. As the cocoon of bone tightens, the chest wall becomes more and more restricted. The heart and lungs are crowded, and the chest cannot expand. Against this pressure, the heart eventually tires out.
Many people who have FOP succumb to a type of heart failure where the right side of the heart cannot appropriately pump blood to the lung anymore effectively.
No, I'm not lifting now.
Well, the long-term future isn't good because we know that he will eventually become stiff all over, basically. But I don't think about that, because if I think about that, that hurts.
But Damien thinks he's one of the lucky ones. For one thing, he's still able to walk. He's also devised ingenious ways of maintaining his independence, like changing his shirt because his arms won't flex, or slipping on a pair of socks because he can't bend down. Best of all, Damien has modified his car so he can get around independently.
So it hasn't stopped me performing my everyday life. I drove tractors and cars and sort of rode motorbikes and was always cautious of how I did it and what I did.
He's a remarkable man because he is one of the few people I met who is already an adult, a mature adult, who still, thankfully, has mobility. He clearly has the condition. Whether he has a more mild genetic form of it, that's yet to be determined.
Sarah Steele is not so fortunate. Her condition is advanced, but Sarah still has ambitions. She is living at college, studying Spanish. She intends to work as a hospital translator. And she doesn't rule out the prospect of marriage.
It might be tricky, but I don't think I don't want to, at some point in my life, get married.
For now, Sarah protects her body from the ravages of FOP. Bone is inexorably encasing her joints. And there is no medical miracle waiting in the wings. But the Steele family remains realistically hopeful.
There is life to be had even when FOP bone has encased the body. Things have gone beautifully these last years for college, and I have high hopes for her future work life.
I've learned through this 20-year journey with FOP, it takes a lot of tenacity and resourcefulness, but in Sarah's case, she's got all the makings of a wonderful future.
The internet has put Sarah in touch with others who have FOP. Their example has convinced her that anything is possible.
I can still go to college and I can still get a job. I can do anything.